paper, the extreme left are meant to be against corporations, meant to be against, injustice and so on.
Yeah.
And yet they turn out to, be great shills of the New World Order.
Yeah.
So they go so far. Marxists are exactly like this. If you talk to the average Marxist, especially say somebody from Latin America, like a Cuban, or what sounds like a genuine Marxist, you can't help agreeing with a lot of the stuff they're talking about, because they do seem on the surface to be talking about the rights of man and the underprivileged, you see. And this can be very hypnotic until you realize that, wait a minute, these people are just pulling rank again.
Yeah.
They just want a little bit further power up the pyramid. We expect great change.
Yeah.
Especially in the last 30 years, of course, it's kind of a done deal now. But in the last 30 years, a lot of people have been buying into this socialistic, sort of communistic lie almost, and believing it because it sounds good to the ear.
Exactly.
We promote these politicians, we promote these local governors that seem to have this kind of liberal socialistic philosophy because it sounds good. And then finally, nothing's happening good at all. In fact, we find out it can even be worse.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a whole dynamic there. People have to realize that the real answers are not to be found within the political pigsty that these hidden masters have created for us is a very, very key thing.
But people are so attached to their philosophy in that sense. I mean, I have several examples myself when I encounter people who lean towards. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but they're leaning towards the left, and as soon as I begin to expose some of the stuff that is the history of how the communists came about and who financed Lenin and all this stuff and the revolution over in Soviet Union, and it's always like I'm not allowed to touch on those subjects or areas because they are almost sacred. It's a religion basically for them.
Well, isn't that what we just said a few minutes ago about the narrow-mindedness of people who belong?
Yeah.
The moment that you belong to something, or you identify with something, you basically closed off your mind. And there you go. I mean, communist Russia, the bombs and the empty shells of planes were all, put there by Arm & Hammer and the Zionists of America.
Yeah.
They were put there. They claimed to be a communist country, yet John D. Rockefeller and the Rockefeller brothers were giving standing ovations in Moscow's first bank. The first bank of Moscow is a Rockefeller bank.
Yeah.
And when Rockefeller used to drive up to that once a year, he used to go and visit, there'd be a standing ovation. The streets, people would come out of their houses and give him a standing ovation and give him applause. This is known. This is a fact.
Yeah.
Then we'd find out that the whole communist lie has been funded from New York. This has been proven by people. It's irrefutable.
Yeah.
So there's a contradiction, and I can point out several more. In fact, if we have a few minutes, like 5 minutes.
Sure, go ahead.
It's very important to point out these contradictions. Let me give you one. I got about 5 of them that I know off the top of my head. One is that, for instance, like we've been saying or been hinting at other shows, that those people who call themselves Jews today, completely irrationally, contradictorily, imagine that they actually are descendants of people from the Holy Land.
Yeah.
Even though there's not a shred of evidence for that fact. Since we know, even Jewish rabbis are very, very, the ones who know their history, know full well that 80% or more of the Jews that are living today are actually from the Ashkenaz Jews of the Caspian Sea, and therefore were of Mongolian, Turkish stock. There's no connection whatsoever to what they call the Judaism of the Holy Land, and are in fact religious converts. And even the 30%, the 20% left over of so-called Sephardic Jews, who they're the ones who always make the big statement that they are, connected to the original tribe of Benjamin. That's all mostly, wishful thinking.
Yeah.
That group has difficulty tracing themselves back further than the 17th century. There's almost no Jewish family who can actually do it. In fact, but of course in their head, it's a different story.
Yeah.
We have Jewish people today thinking that the state of Israel is really something, that they inherited from the past. That's contradiction number one. I can think of another one. There was, if people are taking notes, they better write this stuff down because they're pretty heavy. One is that remember the Protestant takeover of England?
Yeah, sure.
The famous Battle of the Boyne, the whole concept of King William of Orange.
Yeah.
Fighting the Stuarts. How many people realize that in this great battle, which Protestantism is now going to become, the state religion, and King William of Orange of the House of Hanover from Holland coming to fight the evil Catholic Stuart dynasty. And they actually do defeat James Stuart, James II. But how many people have told you, how many teachers have told you that the man in the world who had the most Stuart blood was William himself.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
William of Orange, the conqueror of the Stuarts, had more Stuart blood in him than James Stuart II. In fact, his wife, and that's Mary II,
yeah,
was the daughter of James Stuart, the man they were fighting.
Okay, I did not know
More than that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Stuarts, of course, are connected to the Catholic Vatican. That's what they're fighting for. The Vatican. They're Catholic.
Yeah.
But the Vatican, Henrik, and the William of Orange of Hanover have the same bank accounts in the same bank. It's the Bank of Belgium. Both of them have their finances in the same bank. The same bank funded both sides in the famous so-called Glorious Revolution of England.
Yeah.
We could have a whole hour show just about the contradiction of that. But why is it that on paper, to this day, people in Northern Ireland will march on the 12th of July, which has just gone past one day. One day ago was 12th of July. And in that city, there are people marching, as they do in Holland. Because they believe that the Protestants dominated, the Stuarts. And yet, both groups were of the same family, and the battles that they engaged in were purely ritualistic. What a contradiction.
Yeah.
Another contradiction.
Oh my God. Yeah.
The British people, of course, fought the Germans in 2 world wars, no less. Yet, they're both from the same Anglo-Saxon race. Germans and Britain couldn't be closer connected racially. More than that, in the Second World War, that was the time of the Windsors, the Royal Windsors.
Yeah.
The Windsor family are Germanic. They're from Saxe-Coburg. The Queen's cousin was the Kaiser.
Yes.
So Britain, in fact, her own father could barely speak a word of English. Okay, this is Elizabeth, the Queen now.
Yeah.
Her grandfather was called George V, for those who don't know, right? His 2 fathers were insane. They were completely mad. They had to be locked up. But George V could hardly speak a word of English. He was German. And Elizabeth's own father, remember?
Yeah.
George VI, he took over from Edward VII when Edward VII, remember the famous abdication when he married the Catholic Mrs. Simpson from America?
No, remind me. What was this?
Well, it's not important, but
okay.
The whole point is that this family, George VI and Queen Elizabeth I and their grandfathers, were of the House of Saxe-Coburg, which is resident in Germany, Belgium, and Holland.
Yeah.
Yet England, which is an Anglo-Saxon race, is suddenly in 2 world wars with Germany, their cousins, their racial cousins.
Yeah.
And the royal family of England is German.
Yeah.
What is mad wrong with this picture? And then worse, coming from an Irish point of view, here's another incredible, sick contradiction. Though the English had persecuted the Irish for centuries, right, reducing their population, to a fragment, I believe that the famine was artificially created. So, we have 2 million people dying of starvation out of 8 million. 2 million others had to immigrate because of the poverty.
Yeah.
Ireland loses 4 million people to a famine.
Yeah.
They'd already been put through the most severe penal laws that ever you could imagine existed in Europe.
Yeah.
We have the famous Statutes of Kilkenny, which oppressed them, which banned the whole of Celtic culture. In future shows, we're going to go into that when we talk more on the Irish connection here.
Yeah.
But the Statutes of Kilkenny were to repress the Celtic culture, right? They literally banned any Celtic culture. The English taxed the air. They took away the Irish most basic rights, and they decimated the population. They let loose people like Cromwell, who killed thousands and thousands of people, and so on and so on and so on, right?
Yeah, yeah.
What do we find in the Second World War? The Irish are joining English battalions to go and fight Germany in the First and Second World War. The Irish have battalions like the Irish Guards.
Yeah.
What are we looking at here? Look at the insanity of human beings. And the Irish are going to fight with England against an enemy that's done Ireland no harm. Fighting for those who've decimated their country.
Yeah.
Okay? We get the picture of the human ignorance?
Oof, my God.
There was a few people who didn't, buy into that, like Errol Flynn. The idea is that he was a spy for the Germans and so on and so forth. So I'm not saying all Irish are implicated in this, but the mass of Irish people support their own destroyers against an enemy that had nothing to do with hurting them at all.
Yeah. So, I mean...
We come up for a date.
Yeah.
I got 2 more examples of this.
Yeah, please go ahead.
In Germany, the Nazis claim that their chief enemy Because everyone says it was the Jews, the Jews, the Jews. No, 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 no. Long before the Germans, the Nazi Party, ever start complaining about the Jews, and you can find this out if you read Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, his greatest adversary in the book, to his mind, was the German aristocracy. Okay, and anyone who studied the Second World War knows this, that he had a major peeve with the German aristocracy.
Yeah.
What do we see happening 5 minutes later after the German, becomes chancellor? He's in league with the German aristocracy. They go on a ship, and they actually sign a deal with Hitler that turned out to be the Night of the Long Knives, in which the aristocracy signed a deal with the Nazis saying that we will help you and fund you and promote you and give you what you want if you go around and kill all the enemies, kill all of our enemies. Like wipe out the leaders of the army, like people like Ernst Röhm, you see, and all these other adversaries. So in 5 minutes, we find that Hitler is in league with the aristocracy that he's been telling you for years he despises.
Yeah.
And he goes around killing people that you would imagine in an enormous slaughter that took place called the Night of the Long Knives. He's slaughtering people that actually you would think on paper would be very much, he'd be for. He would have no threat against.
Yeah.
There's a massive looming contradiction.
There is.
We also find contradictions like the Nazis are meant to be these super racists. Well, then, if they're super racists, what on earth are they doing allied to the Japanese and to the Indians? Did you know that the government of India, at the time of the rise of the Nazis, which was led at that time by President Bose, Prime Minister Bose of India, supported Adolf Hitler? That's
no, I didn't know.
They don't tell you this.
No.
It's the fact that Bose, Prime Minister Bose, was a regular guest of Adolf Hitler, and he was a Brahmin, and he was the Prime Minister of India, and he gave full Indian backing and support to Nazis. Nazis were going to India all the time to study the sacred books and the sacred ways.
Yeah.
We do know officially that Turkey was an ally of the Nazis, and we know that Japan was an ally of the Nazis. Well, then, wait a minute. How does that flow with the theory put forward in the world here, the Western world, that these guys are super racist? You see, we've got a contradiction there.
Yeah, absolutely.
The last contradiction, is the one that's very, very applicable to us now. We have the rise in America in the last couple of years, since George Bush has been in the White House, of the famous neocons, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's not a new thing, but to the public eye it's new. These people are followers of the philosopher Leo Strauss.
Yeah.
So they're actually called Straussians, but people know them today as neocons. Okay, so on paper, the neocons have been supporting in the last lot of years, many books have been written about this, that they were the biggest supporters of Islamic extremists, people like the Taliban and the Mujahideen. The extreme right wing of America supported these extremists because, remember, when Russia was invading Afghanistan?
Yeah.
And people only have to remember the Rambo movies to see the image of the right wing American military guy fighting with the Mujahideen. So people need to remember this, that the extreme right neocons, that's Wolfowitz and Rumsfeld and all of these people, were funding and funding and funding extremists, and even petitioned for the most radical extremist Islamic jihadist leaders to be released en masse from prisons all around the world. And that actually, in fact, happened, okay? And these extremist leaders all met up in Afghanistan and started their militia schools in Afghanistan, funded by American money. Okay, what happens tomorrow? What is happening now in America? The same neocons who are now spouting evangelist Christian ethics, since Bush has actually physically come on to the White House, are now supporting pro-Zionist Jewish movements, who are technically on paper against the jihadist Islamics. So just like I said about the William of Orange, hang on a minute, in 5 minutes in history, we find the same group from New York and Washington going out of their way to fund and promote and lionize extremist jihadists of Mujahideen and Taliban who rise up in Afghanistan and are now considered to be, falsely claimed to be this, new threat, this faux nemesis to democracy and all the rest of it. And then at home territory, there's a pushing through George Bush openly of a neocon philosophy, which is the church and evangelism, which of course is very pro-Zionist. I don't know if you know this in Europe, but it's very clear here to people. But then on paper, the Zionists and the Islamic are completely opposing one another. Contradiction.
These are points that you bring up here that completely turns everything upside down, and it might be a good idea to take a little break here and let people contemplate this, and we can do our little contest here again. Part